So you're freelance and you want to drum up some business, which means you're going to need to do a bit of marketing. We're going to have a look at some tried and tested ways of how you can make yourself and your abilities known to potential clients and what you can do to stand out from the crowd and ultimately get them to say, yes, I will hire you. There's kind of two strands to this, and we're going to call them active and passive marketing. They're pretty self-explanatory in that the first one involves approaching people and deliberately letting them know that you want to work for them. The second is your online profile, so what people see when they Google you, that kind of stuff. A good freelancer should be doing both of these, but we're going to focus much more on the active side of things, because generally speaking, that is what will get the best results. Some freelancers put a great deal of time and effort into passive marketing. They might have a sparkling website or portfolio or really impressive social media feeds. And I am not for a second saying not to do that, and we will get to it later. But there is often a misconception that those things are sufficient to launch and sustain a business by themselves. If you're new to freelancing, then it is perfectly logical and extremely worthwhile to announce that via social media. The trouble is, a lot of people often don't do much more than that. Now, I'll exclude those with 5 million Twitter followers from this because it probably doesn't apply to them. But as important as online platforms are, it is not unusual to find freelancers who are, shall we say, less digitally ubiquitous, who have plenty of work, regular clients, and are generally in pretty good shape. And that is often because they focused on active marketing, which is typically the most direct route to new business. Now, the vast majority of stuff we cover on the Bite-Size Freelance courses is designed to be done remotely. You don't normally have to leave your seat to do it. But the single most successful form of generating work does require you to physically go out, and that is meeting clients in person. If there's someone you want to work for and you can arrange to meet them, get to know them a little bit, and crucially, find out what they need help with and how you can be of use to them, then that is an incredibly powerful thing. I've done this a lot, and although I'd be lying if I said that every single one of those meetings has led to work, more often than not, they have. And I've landed some of my most regular and long-standing customers this way. So we're going to look at how you can arrange this sort of thing and the etiquette around it. It's better if you can arrange these meetings so it's just you and the client. Try and meet them for a coffee or lunch, because in that situation you should have their undivided attention, and that is when this process is at its most effective. There is absolutely nothing at all wrong with meeting clients at industry events, say a conference or a networking event. That can be just as valuable. But it's worth remembering that any potential clients will probably not be attending an event like that solely for the purpose of talking to freelancers. There will be other demands on their time, and you may well be in competition with other people who are cozying up to them. You don't have that problem when you've got them one-to-one, and most people will not agree to meet with us unless they think it's worth their time. So if they say yes, we're off to a good start. When you get in touch, offer to meet them at a location that's convenient for them. That could be their office, it might be an event that you're both attending. I know I just said that that's not the best place to do it, but if you pre-arrange the meeting and get a bit of time alone with them, then that can work pretty well, because they'll be there anyway and they don't have to go out of their way to meet you. Or it might be a restaurant or a cafe close to where they work. Assuming it's convenient for the client, the cafe-restaurant option is the best of those. It also explains the rather liberal amount of footage of coffee that I've included on this course. There we go, there's another one. The reason for that is that it's a much more relaxed environment than something like an office, and it's conducive to having a bit of a chat and sparking up a relationship, which is ultimately what we're trying to do. If you do meet a prospective client for lunch or for a coffee, offer to pay for it. It's a polite gesture. It shows that you're grateful of their time, and for most freelancers, if you get one piece of work out of it, that will probably cover your costs. I always take copies of my CV or resume to these meetings. If you have business cards, then that is what they are there for, and the same applies to physical portfolios, which are particularly important if you're a photographer, designer, etc. If you work in the audio-visual arena, bring a tablet, laptop, etc. so you can display your work, and also bring a fresh, clean pair of headphones for the client in case they want to watch and listen to your work. If you create or work with physical products that are small enough to put on a table in a cafe, then absolutely bring some samples along. Even better if you can leave the client with a free one. It's worth letting the clients know that you have these things with you, so they can check them out if they want to. At the same time, don't force these things on them during the meeting. If they take your CV and a business card away with them, great. And if there's a digital version of your portfolio, then you can always send that to them via email as a bit of a follow-up. Just don't insist that they take those things because it should be at their discretion. If you're meeting the client at or near their office, then it's worth asking if they have colleagues who might also need a hand with the types of things you're offering. Often when I've been in these meetings, the client will say, actually, the guy at the desk over there always needs help with, and they might introduce you. That's when it's good to have a stash of up-to-date CVs, resumes, business cards, anything promotional that you can physically give to someone. And if you can get their contact details as well, even better. If the meeting is at a cafe, restaurant or something, it's still worth asking if you could help the client's colleagues. And if they're happy to take away an extra copy or two of your CV, they can pass it on when they're back in the office. Obviously, the point of all this is to spark up a relationship with the client, and they should walk away with a good understanding of who you are and what you're capable of. However, what is arguably more valuable to you, the freelancer, is to find out what they need help with. So ask them. This is the sort of thing people appreciate because while you are there to sell yourself, if you take the time to work out what they don't have time to do themselves and where they lack the resources you might be offering, it shows initiative, it proves that you are likely to be useful, and it allows you to tailor the services you then offer to suit that client. In short, you can provide them with useful things that they want, and you don't end up bothering them by offering them things they don't need. Now, I absolutely believe this is the best method to generate new business, but it's important to remember that not everyone is going to take us up on a meeting when we approach them. Some people won't reply, others will say thanks but no thanks, and it's easy to get downhearted when that happens. But stick with it, because I cannot stress enough how well this works. Another thing not to be put off by is when people say things like they have very little budget, or they rarely use freelancers. Unless they explicitly say, we have no budget, or we do not commission freelancers, that means there's work there for the taking, and whatever budget there is could be yours. I once approached somebody in exactly this way, and his initial response was, I'm not sure it's worth your time. We've got a really small budget and we don't commission much. I told him I didn't mind. I was still happy to see him. And I walked away from the meeting with 2 commissions, and he became a really good long-term regular client. Another thing to remember is that even if they are not in a position to commission work when you initially approach them, a lot of businesses will get cash injections on a more sporadic basis. For example, they might not have a regular monthly budget for your type of work, but if a big project crops up a few months later, then they're probably going to want some help. So just because they're not commissioning when you send your first email doesn't mean they won't be later on. So it's still worth a meeting. If you check out your course pack, then you'll find a couple of examples of these kinds of first approach cold call emails. These are real. I've used them in exactly these circumstances, and they led to meetings with brand new clients and immediate commissions. So feel free to check them out, use them as templates, and adapt them to suit you and your industry. A few more really quick things on physical meetings. Be as flexible as you can with dates and times, and give people plenty of notice when you're arranging them. They're not going to be sitting around waiting to go for a coffee with someone they've never met, so don't be surprised if you have to wait a few weeks or longer before you can pin them down. Also, while this is often the best way to get new clients, it's equally effective for sustaining existing relationships. You don't need to go and see your regular clients every week, but if you haven't seen them for a while and you're likely to be passing their neck of the woods, let them know before you make that trip and see if they fancy a coffee. Even if you're speaking to them regularly on the phone or by email, those relaxed face-to-face meetings go a very long way. They can often lead to broader opportunities, and it's yet another thing that a lot of freelancers simply don't do. So it really makes you stand out from the crowd. Finally, if you're planning to do a few of these and you have more than one existing or potential client or other contacts in relatively close proximity, see if you can meet up with a few in a day. It might take a bit of setting up, but if you spend one full day seeing people, then that's a good use of your time. Even if it means a really full day, getting down the night before and staying with a friend or in a hotel. You're not going to be making repeat trips to the same area, so you've only paid for one return train ticket or one lot of fuel in the car, not 3 or 4 times as much. In short, it's a good day's marketing. As good as face-to-face meetings are, you might not be in a position where you're able to physically get in front of some or indeed any of the clients you want to work for. Now, if that's the case, then the most obvious place to start is an online freelance platform. Now, there are loads of these. There's Upwork, Guru, Freelancer.com, People Per Hour, TopTal, and stacks more. And it can be a bit bamboozling when you first start looking at them because they're all kind of variations on the same thing. Boil it down, and they're an online marketplace for freelancers. You set up a profile, and we will look at online profiles later on. You can apply for jobs, and prospective clients can approach you. Fundamentally, that's about it. However, they've all got their nuances, and some of them might be more geared towards different industries or certain types of work. So you may find that some of those platforms suit you better than others, depending on the type of work you do. We could probably spend the rest of the course listing them all off and explaining the differences between them. So instead, there's a list of some of the bigger and better known ones in the course pack, along with a little explanation of what each one does differently and the industries and types of work that they suit. Now, as far as I'm aware, there is absolutely nothing stopping you from signing up to multiple platforms. And if this is the route you're going down, I would encourage you to do so, because it stands to reason that the more widely you market yourself, the more work you're going to get. Now, it's worth bearing in mind that online freelance platforms are a bit of a different ballgame to going out and getting your own clients, be that via the meeting thing we discussed or through things like pitching, which we'll look at shortly. It'll be different for everyone, but generally speaking, it is arguably easier to set yourself up as freelance on an online platform because as soon as you've created a profile, the jobs are all advertised on there and you can start applying for them immediately. In that respect, they can be really good for freelancers who perhaps don't have a huge amount of experience, or maybe for people who are looking for relatively small amounts of work. For example, freelancers who work part-time alongside a 9-to-5 job, or fit in their work around parenting. Having said that, there are big-time career freelancers who make their living by these platforms, and particularly if you look at something like TopTal, they have quite stringent standards and claim to offer highly experienced freelancers. So you're certainly well beyond casual work at that point. The downside to these platforms is that there are a lot of freelancers on there. So you need a strong profile and usually some good reviews to stand out from the crowd, because competition for jobs can be pretty hot. They're also businesses, and while the exact model might vary between sites, there is typically a charge to operate on their platform. That might be a cut of your fee, a subscription cost, etc. So you need to be prepared for that. If you're thinking of signing up to one of these platforms, then if you can find a fellow freelancer in your industry who uses the one you're thinking of joining, then just ask them what it's like. See what they reckon. If you don't know anyone directly, then maybe stick a post on social media. If there's something like a Facebook group relevant to your sector or to that platform, then join that and ask. You'll probably get some different opinions, but it never hurts to ask the question. Another thing to remember is that typically the most successful people on these platforms are the ones that have been working through them for a good period of time. They've done a lot of jobs, they've done them well, and they've got visibly good ratings. They're the kinds of people that clients are going to gravitate towards. So it's important to understand that that's who you're competing with. and it's probably going to take time and potentially involve taking on some smaller, maybe lower paid jobs just to get your reputation up. Now, the best way to do that and to get yourself to a level where you can start applying for the bigger, better paid jobs is good old-fashioned customer service. You do as good a job as you can and you meet or beat your deadlines. Now, that's important for any business, but it really counts in that online environment where people are actively rating you. And it's highly likely that clients could be selecting you based on your reviews or star rating. Now, that was a slightly glib way of summing up customer service because there's a lot more to it than just being good. But if that is an area you're looking to develop, there is another bite-sized freelance course which covers exactly that topic. It's called Going It Alone, Customer Service in Good Business Sense, and it gets into the nitty-gritty of keeping your clients happy so that they come back and offer you more work. Last thing about online platforms is don't rule out the sort of non-freelance specific job sites. So I'm talking about things like conventional job advertising websites like Indeed, Monster, Reed, basically whatever the big job sites are in your area. They're different to the Upworks of this world because they're traditionally associated with salaried positions, but they also advertise freelance jobs. Those sites are typically not as freelance centric as your gurus and your top towels, and a lot of freelancers might not consider them because of that. But just as an example, here's me going on to indeed.co.uk and punching in nothing more than the words freelance and London. And at that time, there were 2,217 jobs advertised. The next step along from that is industry-specific job boards. So things like Cision Jobs for journalists and PRs, Design Week for, obviously, designers, and Stack Overflow for software developers. As with those big job sites, there is usually a mix of staff and freelance positions advertised, but the sites themselves at least kind of hone in on particular industries. And if you check out the course pack, you will find a list of them covering different sectors. Okay, so the next strand to active marketing is pitching. Now, it's important to point out that pitching may not work for every type of freelance business. So if you're thinking, that just doesn't work for me, I need to apply for specific jobs, or I'm reliant on my clients coming to me with commissions, then that's totally understandable, and you might want to jump to the next section. However, pitching can be an extremely powerful marketing technique in certain sectors, particularly in creative industries. So things like design, PR, journalism, lots of forms of writing. And as part of the research for this course, I had a chat to several people across various industries about pitching, both freelancers themselves and people who regularly receive pitches from freelancers. And although there were always some slight differences, when it comes to a good pitch, pretty much the same rules apply, regardless of your discipline or your industry. So we're basically going to break it down into two methods, right and wrong. The wrong way is lazy and irrelevant. That sounds blunt, but one of the things I consistently hear from multiple clients is that they get sick of freelancers offering them things they neither want nor need. It is very, very common to hear people who regularly commission freelancers saying, I don't need that, I've got someone to do it, please stop waving it under my nose. It's either that or they're just fed up with pitches that are in no way related to or appropriate for what they're doing. So, before you do anything, just think about what you're pitching. Think about who you're pitching it to and ask yourself whether or not they would realistically want it. Try and put yourself in the client's shoes. Be completely honest with yourself, and if the answer is no, they probably wouldn't want it, then that pitch is probably not right for that client. It might be appropriate for a different client. And we're going to look at how you can kind of identify the right one shortly. Now, the lazy thing is kind of along the same lines in that pitches that are too short, lack detail, are spelled wrong, or contain like cheesy hooks, silly jokes, ridiculous pictures or GIFs or bits of clip art. Honestly, I know clip art's a bit out of date now, but I have genuinely seen recent pitches containing it. So here's a couple of kind of hypothetical examples of lazy ones. And for sake of argument, it's a pitch to an editor of some kind. So say I'd approached some sort of gardening publication or something like that chances are they're already going to have somebody, probably multiple people, to cover the Great British Flower Festival. Second, it doesn't say when the Flower Festival is. We don't know who's going to be there, or if there's any kind of new angle to it. Basically, we don't know anything at all. Here's another one for the wildlife fans among you, just to sort of, broaden the examples a little bit. I've obviously hammed these up a bit, and it might come across as kind of corny or unrealistic, but I have genuinely seen so many pitches like this, both from freelancers who pitched things to me when I was working in a staff role and commissioning work, and from people working in PR who were trying to get me to write about whatever they were promoting. It is not uncommon for emails of this type to get the recipient's name wrong or include other really basic, glaring errors, none of which reflect well on the sender. It's just sloppy, it's unprofessional, and realistically, it's not going to get you very far. Final one on the not to do's. Don't just email or call people and ask if they've got any work. That's not even a pitch, and it essentially assumes that a client has a pile of things they want to commission and that they are just sitting around waiting for freelancers to get in touch. It's really lazy. And I've also sat in front of so many clients who've told me that loads of freelancers do exactly that, and it just gets on their nerves. So all of that stuff we just looked at was the wrong way to compose a pitch. Here's the right way. Now, the email on your screen now is an example of a pitch to a section editor of a major national newspaper, and it resulted in an immediate commission. This email is in the course pack, along with another similar example, so you can download both and use them as templates if you want to. This pitch went to what for me was a high-profile client. This guy once told me he gets 300 emails a day, many of which are from people pitching him things. This email was strong enough to get past all of that, so let's break it down and work out why he paid attention to this and what made him commission the work. First of all, the email subject line. Now, a lot of people put things like possible commission or potential article or work or pitch. That's best avoided because it's quite vague, and if someone's had 20 other pitch emails that day, or in this guy's case, 3 figures worth, they might not be in the mood to even open it. The best thing to do is describe as succinctly as possible what it is you're pitching, and in a way that is kind of accurate but also interesting, if that kind of makes any sense. So fundamentally, it needs to describe what you're pitching, but if it can do that and kind of draw the reader in a little bit, and maybe even leave a certain amount of ambiguity, then even better. Second, the preamble before we get into the pitch is less than 2 lines. A lot of people write their life story or their career history at this point. They start by selling themselves as a person, talking about how experienced they are, and that can run for several paragraphs. A pitch is not about you. It should focus on the product or service you're offering. So get straight into that. Now, this pitch is effectively written in what journalists call the news pyramid format. Now, forgive me if I'm teaching any of you to suck eggs here, but that basically means that you present the most relevant information right from the beginning. You then disseminate it down in order of importance. So the reader could just read the first line and they would have a relatively good idea of the basic premise. The format is lean and it gets to the point, and it works well for pitches. If we scroll down a bit, we can see that there's a fair bit of detail here, and that is also beneficial. Some people worry about putting too much in a pitch. They think it should be really short because their clients are time poor and they don't want to be reading too much. Now, to a point, that is true. Again, do not write your life story at the beginning of the email. But as long as the detail is relevant, there is always room for it. Evidence of which is the 300 email a day guy who commissioned this. These 2 paragraphs effectively demonstrate that what we're selling, in this case a story, is well researched and has substance. The addition here of a 1-word quote, a little anecdote from an interview, makes it believable, and it proves that I've done my homework. It's not totally formal either. I've used phrases like up to the task, folk in the know, up your street, get cracking, That is partly just how I speak. But what those things also do is they just make it a bit chattier and a little bit easier to digest. It's kind of as if you were sat in front of that person talking to them. If it's a particularly business-like organisation or individual, or you've just got no idea what they're like, then you might want to reconsider that. But generally, a little bit of colloquialism is fine and it makes it easy to read. This next bit is quite powerful. Again, its relevance will depend on the type of work you do, but if you can include something time sensitive in your pitch, it gives the client a reason to get off their backside and commission you now. It doesn't have to be some sort of themed week like you can see in the example here, but it does need to be closely related to whatever it is you're pitching, and something that's happening pretty soon, within, say, the next month. Incidentally, if you do want to go with the theme days, weeks, months thing, there is a website called awarenessdays.com. The link is in the course pack, and that lists a lot of these sort of things for the UK and US markets, and it also has a downloadable calendar, so it's a good reference point. But you could always just Google themed weeks or events and then a day, week, month, country in question. Another important thing is what this pitch leaves out. Although there is plenty of detail and the client really gets the gist of what we're selling, that's all they get. I've named 2 sources, but only the organisations, not the individuals I actually spoke to. We've included a single word quote and a publicly available web address. The reason for this is you want to keep your cards just close enough to your chest so that the client doesn't look at it and think, that's a good idea, I can do that myself. Or I can get somebody else on the staff to do it and I don't have to pay the freelancer. If you're dealing with good, honourable people, then they won't do that. But all you're doing here is just protecting your intellectual property a little bit. And you're making sure that your pitch is exclusive enough so that you are the only one who can do that work. It's not in this email because I had worked for this organisation before. But if you're approaching somebody for the first time and they don't know anything about you, then it's fine to drop in a short line at the end of the message saying something like, if you'd like to know a bit more about me and the work I've done previously, then click here. The words click here should be linked text and they should lead to your LinkedIn page, your website, whatever it is that you have online and that client can, should they wish, head to find out who you are and see some of your professional history. That is far better than 6 paragraphs telling them how great you are and why they should hire you. On the subject of approaching people for the first time, there's nothing wrong with pitching to a client and simultaneously asking to meet them for a coffee like we talked about earlier. In fact, the very best way to do it is, if your pitch is successful and they like your first piece of work, ask to go and meet them after that. Because at that point, they're already interested in you and you're potentially valuable to them on a longer term basis. If you're going in cold and you've never worked for the organisation in question, then it is worth spending a bit of time identifying who is the best person to contact before you make your pitch. Ideally, you want it to go directly to the individual responsible for commissioning, or second best, an immediate colleague who will pass it on. It isn't usually that hard. A bit of Googling or the About Us or Contact Us or Our Team page on a company's website will usually steer you in the right direction. A bit of sniffing around on social media also doesn't go amiss either, because LinkedIn in particular allows you to search via company and you can see all the employees with corresponding profiles. I'd almost always go with an email for a pitch, just because it's a reasonably formal, established method. But if you just can't find somebody's email address or they're not responding, but you can find them on social media, then drop them a private message on there instead. The exception here is if they are particularly active on whatever social media platform it is, then that might actually be a better line in. And that's also where a little bit of homework / snooping around can pay dividends. Before you hit send on your cold pitch or first time client approach email, it's a good idea to run it through an email spam checker. These are potentially extremely valuable to freelancers because a lot of us are using things like Gmail, Hotmail, BT, AOL, pretty generic personal email addresses, or we might be using ones that have our own unique company name on them. And certain organisations' firewalls and spam filters can be quite aggressive, and they will send unfamiliar or personal looking emails to junk folders by default. You might find that with kind of bigger security conscious organisations like banks. Now, if that happens to you, then it doesn't matter how good your pitch is. If that person doesn't even receive your email, you ain't getting the work. Now, there's a website called itsnotspam.com that allows you to conduct what is effectively a dry run of sending an email. It issues you with a report to show you how likely it is that that email will end up in the abyss of somebody's junk folder. It's probably not foolproof, so you might not want to take it as 100% gospel, but it could help you just tweak your emails to make them a bit more inbox friendly before you get in touch with a new client. I believe it's primarily designed for en masse email marketing, so newsletters and things like that, but there's nothing to stop individuals from using it either. If the person you're pitching to ignores you, chase it up once, a week after you sent the first email. If after that you still do not hear anything, then don't pursue it any further. It's really demoralising when you don't get a response or if people turn you down. We all feel that. A fellow freelancer once told me that self-employment was a manic depressive world. Now, as much as I enjoy working for myself, there have been times when I've completely agreed with that guy. But the thing to remember is that this happens to everybody. Highly experienced, veteran, and even famous freelancers have their pitches turned down. So wherever you are on that spectrum, you are not alone. Now, as tough as silence is, it's really not a good idea to keep hounding the person you contacted for a response or to try to change their mind after they've said no. Multiple clients have told me that they have experienced that from freelancers, and it only dissuades them from commissioning them in future. The best thing you can do if you're ghosted or turned down is to have another read of your pitch. Briefly reflect on it and ask yourself objectively why it didn't work and if you can improve it. Then, if it's appropriate for a different client or you can tailor it to them, have another go with somebody else, because there are plenty more fish in the sea. Now, as much as I am for good quality pitches and against sloppy, lazy ones, the truth is that you kind of can actually get away with a bit of lazy pitching when you're an established freelancer and it's a client you've worked for a long time. If it's someone you know really well and you do stuff for them regularly, you've got a good rapport with them, if that's where you are, then you don't have to jump through all of these hoops. What I find works well in those cases, if you want to pitch them something, is to mention it while you're communicating with them about other work. So if you're on the phone or you've got a few emails flying back and forth, if you drop it in as a kind of, oh, by the way, I've got this thing, then get your pitch in nice and casually, that's often quite effective. It obviously depends entirely on the client and your relationship with them, because some are looser with the leash than others. But I found in that situation, a paragraph or even just a sentence or two with the core details can actually be enough for a successful commission. Okay, so on to passive marketing. Now, the difference between this and everything we've looked at so far is that it doesn't involve directly approaching clients for work. It's more your figurative shop window. It's your social media, it's your website, it's your freelance platform profile, all the things people see when they go looking for us online. It's important to have that stuff looking good because it could well be a client's first impression of us. And it often complements a lot of the active marketing techniques we've already looked at. For example, if you've asked to go and meet someone or you've just pitched them something, the first thing they might do is punch your name into Google or click one of the links on your email signature. Just as a little side note, it is always a good idea to include links to your website and or your professional social media on your email signature, along with a phone number. Now, we're not going to get into things like getting loads of followers or interacting with people on social media and things like that. I'm certainly not dissuading that. It's just that's kind of a different ball game to what we're doing here, and we don't really have time to cover it in detail in this course. What we're more concerned with here is creating smart, professional-looking profiles or websites, and ones that are relevant to your sector and will reflect well when potential clients have a gander at them. As with pitches, the most important element with any of these things, social media, website, your Upwork profile, is that if we're not going to do them properly, then we're better off not doing them at all. There is a perception that as long as you're on social media in some form or other, that's good enough. I don't believe that's true, because if a profile or a website has just got your name on it and nothing much else, then that just tells anybody looking at it that you can't be bothered to finish it. That's not really the message you want to be sending out to clients. If nothing else, whatever it is you're putting out there needs to be complete, by which I mean fill in all the sections and add a picture. It is by no means the best in the world, but there is a link to my LinkedIn profile in the course pack, purely as an example of one that is kind of full up, if you like. Also in the course pack are a few links to articles explaining how to set up strong profiles on various social media and freelance platforms. They're not too intricate, they're just kind of basic best practice guides. Now, if we look specifically at social media, it is worth considering which platforms to go for. This is not rocket science, but fundamentally, the ones on which we choose to display our wares should reflect the type of work we do and the industry in which we do it. So if you are, for example, a photographer or a designer, you work in a visual field, then picture-led platforms like Instagram, Pinterest, and maybe something like Behance are the logical places for you to have a presence and display your work. You probably want a LinkedIn profile as well for the kind of business contact stuff. And you could also cross-post your pictures, your videos, etc. across multiple platforms. Quick side note about personal profiles, and this probably applies more to things like Facebook. If you have a profile that is not work themed, it's more for friends, family, holiday pictures, that kind of thing. And there's maybe some daft posts or photos on there that you perhaps wouldn't want potential clients to see. Then just quickly change your privacy settings so that only your friends on Facebook or whatever platform it is can see your profile. It's just so that if clients don't know who you are and they then Google you, a drunken night out picture is not the first thing they see. There are lots of conflicting opinions about how to do social media well, as well as what sites you should be on and generally how much time and effort you should put into it. I am quite happy to be challenged on this, but my personal opinion is that unless you are actually deriving an income from social media, then less is more. 2 or 3 relevant platforms are sufficient for people to find you via Google, and they'll usually do the online shop window thing well enough for your average freelancer. Again, unless utilising social media is actually part of your job, it can be a huge distraction, and it can really eat into your working hours. Having said that, a lot of people swear by going big on it, and it can equally be a great way to advertise yourself and interact with potential clients. And if that is working for you, then by all means stick with it. Now, wherever you sit on that spectrum, it's definitely worth checking out a couple of management tools. So things like Hootsuite or TweetDeck, just because they can help you do things like prepare, schedule, or keep an eye on posts across multiple platforms. And that means that you don't have to open up individual apps or separate websites every time you want to check them out. It just makes it a bit easier to keep tabs on multiple feeds. And it also kind of helps to compartmentalize your approach to social media in general. There's some links to a few management tools in the course pack, along with a little bit of further reading about the best times to post on some of the popular social media platforms to just increase your chances of people seeing what you're publishing. Now, as for the business of posting, if the work you've done is publicly visible online, then you should absolutely be sticking it up there, along with links, pictures, hashtags, tagging people in it, all the bells and whistles. If that work is not published online, but you have images, videos, GIFs, TikToks, etc. of the project itself, or pictures or footage of you doing the work, and crucially, the people you are doing the work for are okay with you posting it, then go to town. I've had new and existing clients get in touch saying things like, we saw you did something on X, Y, or Z, could you do something similar for us? So where appropriate, Post as liberally as you like. However, there is a caveat to this, because what you do not want to do is broadcast anything that is in any way sensitive for your client. So if I've, say, written something for an online publication and anyone can find it on the internet, it's got my byline on it, that is obviously fine to post. But if that piece of writing were for a publication that people, say, pay a subscription fee to read, it's not freely available online, you've got to go somewhere and buy it or sign up for it, the client might not be too happy if I take a photo of it and splash it all over Twitter, because it would completely undermine their business model, and I would have cheesed off a paying customer for the sake of self-promotion. I've seen people do that in the past. 9 times out of 10 it's completely innocent, they just don't think about it. But it can be a one-way ticket to not being hired again, and therefore, in those kind of circumstances, it is not worth it. So it actually does pay to be a little bit savvy and just think before you post. The same cautionary tale applies to work that you might do on what's often called a white label basis. And that means it doesn't have your name or your brand on it, and the client might want to make it look like it's their own work, not the work of a third party. That is not exclusive to, but it is pretty common with bigger corporate clients. And if that is the arrangement you have, then just give a little bit of thought to whether or not they'd be okay with you publicising it. If you're in any doubt at all, just ask them before you post. Posting can also be used as more of an active marketing technique when we might be a bit low on work. And freelancers will sometimes announce that they haven't got too much going on and kind of appeal to clients to get in touch and commission them. Now, as with some of our other techniques, there is a right and a wrong way to do this. The wrong way is a post that expresses a lot of emotion and discusses at length how sad we are that we haven't got as much work as we would like, and that being freelance is the hardest game in the world, and if you've never done it, then you just don't know what it's like, and I wish someone would just commission me. I've definitely felt like that before, and most people who've been freelance for any length of time have probably felt like that too. But pouring our hearts out on our professional social media, I'm not convinced it's a rock-solid marketing technique. The right way. So the best bit about this is it's actually quite a lot shorter than the wrong way. Now on the screen now is an example of something I saw one of my colleagues do. He used the first part of the post, which we haven't included, to publicise the article he'd written for one of his clients, which also happened to be his last because that client was closing down. At the bottom of the post, he wrote this. This also serves as an advert for anyone wanting or needing content to drop me a line. I'd love to keep putting this enthusiasm to good use. Hashtag freelance writer, hashtag content writer. Now that's very short and simple, and after he'd posted it, clients came knocking with commissions. Here's another one from another freelance colleague of mine. I find myself with a fairly empty diary at the moment, so if I can help anyone with some words in any shape or form, please do drop me a line. And that was followed by a description of his specialities. What these posts do is announce our availability. They are the freelancer's online equivalent of turning the sign in a shop window from closed to open. They also tell the truth. They don't disguise the fact that we could do with some more work, but they also don't dwell on it. They're professional, they get to the point, and they announce that we are open for business, which is what a good advertisement should do. So slightly different to social media are online portfolios. And these can be great little ways of showing off your work, and another thing that really suits people who work in visually creative fields. Designers, photographers, illustrators, videographers, those kinds of guys. It's worth spending a little bit of time getting them looking sharp before you do anything with them, because that may well be your way in with a lot of new clients. You're trading on your visuals, and they might well ask to see some sort of portfolio before they commission you. So that is one of the places where it's definitely worth putting some effort in. Again, there are links to some of these in the course pack, along with the list of some of the bigger online portfolio sites. You do have to pay for some of the swankier looking ones, but you may find it's worth the investment. So once you've got your portfolio looking crisp, make sure that a link to it is clearly visible on your social media feeds and on your email signature. The nice thing about these is that as well as being kind of a fairly simple one-time setup, they can also feed into the active marketing side of things. As an example, every January, a photographer friend of mine sends both his existing and potential clients a little cherry-picked selection of his best work throughout the previous year. And I think he throws in a few videos, GIFs and other bits and pieces for good measure. He swears by this, and he reckons it's a really good way of jogging his existing clients' memories, just reminding them that he's still around. And he also says it's a great way to drum up new business. The only thing to watch out for with online portfolios is whether or not anyone who looks at yours can easily copy and paste the material. The better hosting sites will usually have facilities to prevent that, but I've seen some really quite high profile people, celebrity level, get that wrong. And they've effectively made their work available as a free download. So just check that stuff out before you publish. As for fully fledged bespoke websites, there is often a question as to whether or not freelancers really need them. I've got one now, but that's only because I needed somewhere to host these courses. But before that, I had more than 7 years of freelancing and I never had my own website. It didn't seem to hold me back, and I have plenty of other colleagues who are the same. Given how prolific the likes of social media, online portfolios and freelance-specific platforms are, a standalone website may not be a prerequisite for many freelancers. Having said that, a really good professionally done website looks great, and it can arguably make you look a bit bigger than you really are. So I would never say don't get one. It's just whether or not you think it's worth the time and or the money of putting one together. If you're working for or attempting to work for large high-end clients, then maybe a smart, up-to-date website could be worth the investment. If you are going to have a website, then those same do it properly rules very much apply, because there are so many rubbish and cheap looking I'm a freelancer type websites out there that people have knocked up in half an hour on a free website maker. The point of a business website, certainly in a freelancer's case, is that it does the shop window thing of allowing clients a look at who you are and what you do. And if your shop window is cracked, dirty and broken, people are not going to want to go in. Now, I would love to give you some examples of how not to do it, but that really wouldn't be fair to those people. However, there are a couple of links in the course pack to roundup pages displaying the websites of some freelancers who've done it really well. Now, a good website doesn't have to cost the earth. Web designers, software developers, etc., you guys are likely more than capable of doing it yourselves, which is probably the most affordable way. But for those of us who are not digital whizzes, the big website builders such as Wix and Squarespace will likely be among our best bets, because they kind of specialize in professional template-based platforms and you don't have to speak fluent JavaScript in order to sling them together. A lot of them have free trials, so some of them don't even charge until the website goes live. And you can kind of play around with it, get it ready, and then you only have to cough up when you actually hit publish. Most of those types of platforms have fairly prominent powered by Wix or powered by Squarespace logos that appear on the site as standard. You can usually pay a little bit more to remove them, and personally I think ditching their branding is worthwhile if you can afford it, because the site will just look that bit smarter and more professional if you do. And you've guessed it, there is a list of some of the biggest and most popular website platforms in the course pack. You don't have to use them though, because you could always ask a freelance web developer to make your site for you. You can find the likes of them on Upwork and its contemporaries, or you could just ask around. And whatever way you get there, it's always good to hire a fellow freelancer. That's our lot for marketing techniques, and if you're looking to either start your freelance business from scratch or just get yourself a little bit of extra work or a couple more clients, then hopefully you're now geared up for it. As we said at the very beginning of this course, finding work, and enough of it, is arguably the most daunting part of being freelance, regardless of how long you've been doing it. But just as a bit of reassurance, I've often found that you don't have to be going all guns blazing on the marketing front all the time. You've certainly got to do some when you first start out, and there will always be occasions when you need to go back and revisit some of the things we've covered here. But most good career freelancers will tell you that a little bit often goes a long way. The other thing not to be dissuaded by is when people turn us down. We might have a knockout pitch, but sometimes we just don't get a bite. Some people ignore us, some say thanks but no thanks, others haven't got the budget. That happens to all of us, regardless of who we are or how long we've been doing what we do, and it's really tough. But the best way of dealing with it is to move on. We can adapt that pitch, or whatever it is, to the next prospective client, and we can have a go with somebody else. Flexibility is one of our greatest strengths as freelancers, so we should absolutely play to it. Don't forget to download the course pack because it contains a lot of further reading to help you sharpen up both your active and your passive marketing. And please feel free to leave a rating and a review now that you've finished the course. Freelancing is a wonderfully broad church, so I'm also keen to hear from those of you who might have some completely different techniques to the stuff we've covered here, and from anyone who might be looking to improve other aspects of their freelance business beyond marketing. In addition to this one, there are several courses in the Bite Size Freelance series that cover the likes of customer service, efficiency and productivity, and handling late payments. And like this one, they are also short, around about an hour tops. And again, they're designed for freelancers of all types and levels. Thank you very much indeed for your interest in this course. I sincerely hope you found it useful, and I wish you all the very best in your freelance career.